Hi everyone, I'm Ed Amoroso from Tag Cyber, and I'm here with Brian Reed, who is it's a CMO, but Chief Mobility Officer, not Chief Marketing Officer for a very cool company called NowSecure. Brian, welcome to the discussion.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Hey Brian, well, before we get into the discussion, why don't you give us just a real brief summary of the company, and then I want to hear all about mobility security. What do you guys do at NowSecure?
Yeah, sure. So NowSecure is a mobile application security company. We provide automated security testing software, expert pen testing services, training, a full solution suite for organizations who are building mobile applications and organizations that are consuming and using commercial mobile applications in large scale. It's a really interesting company history. I joined a few years ago. But our founder actually got started building a mobile forensics business and wrote the original books on iOS and Android forensics all the way back in 2008 and 2009. So the company's actually been on the journey of mobile security since the birth of the modern smartphone. And, you know, Ed, when you and I first crossed paths, I was working with BlackBerry, right? And who'd have thought we are where we are today with the massively pervasive penetration of multiple different devices and 5 to 6 million apps in the commercial app stores that has really kind of transformed the whole globe. And so our mission is to save the world from unsafe mobile apps, and we work with organizations to ensure the highest level of security and privacy and compliance for their mobile apps.
Well, first of all, it's funny. When you said, you know, we work with companies that use mobile apps, and so it's like that's everybody. Right? I guess at one point that might have been something where the Venn diagram might have showed something interesting, but now I can't think of anybody not in that space. Now let's talk about mobile security first, and we'll get into mobile app. What's been your observation? You've been staring at this a long time. Is it when people ask you what is the mobile threat, what usually is loss of data, theft? You know, how should we think about that problem?
Yeah, so I think we'll start at the macro level. So when you look at data today from organizations like Comscore who measure internet traffic, 70% of digital time is now spent in mobile applications, not mobile browsers, not the desktop, not your web browser. So mobile applications dominate digital time spent. And for many industries, mobile applications dominate revenue. In fact, mobile apps have whole new, categories like Uber, for example, that were content, and application creators. So you've got that very high digital traffic rate, but the data we find in our own research and industry surveys like Gartner and others is that organizations spend 98% of their security dollars on web, cloud, and network, and less than 2% on mobile. And there we have a chasm, which is generally there's ignorance and lack of investment around mobile security as a priority because people are focused on the traditional, moat, bridge, gate, four walls of the perimeter, right? And so it's been very interesting sort of along that journey. And the mobile security risk now is really one of the mobile app as a gateway to the enterprise, right? So when you look at an organization such as British Airways, who's known for a major mobile breach back in 2017, 2018, British Airways was hacked through their mobile app. So the people who did it researched and surveilled their mobile app. They reverse engineered it. They discovered how the mobile app was communicating with the back end. They got their hands on some credentials. They used it to do an attack on the back end. They got through the gate, the moat, the firewall, and everything else. And they got to the crown jewels of some 350 customers, right? And so that's an example of how you may be thinking, hey, a mobile app, one user, what do I care? It's an attack vector into the enterprise. And for most enterprises, sadly, they don't recognize that, and therefore they're not prioritizing their security. And so I'm here talking to people like you to help understand, hey, there is this piece of the attack surface, there is this piece of your security perimeter. You should make sure you got the doors closed, and you should be making sure you're doing the right things around mobile security for your users and your customers and your business.
So Brian, the average sort of citizen consumer, when they think mobile app, they think about the kinds of apps that they'll download from an app store that they'll use to play games or check the weather and so on. And certainly those have a play in business, but help us understand kind of the relative threats between maybe these popular consumer apps and ones that businesses would be using as part of their essentially natively embedded in their workflow. Right. Help me with that a little bit.
It's a good question, right? So I'm going to kind of walk through the landscape of use cases for mobile, right? So I'm a bank. I have retail banking customers. I have a mobile app that my customers use to talk to my bank, right? Definite crown jewels, definite tier one risk. Definitely, you're going to do everything you can to lock down that scenario, right? From the development lifecycle of building it through the production operation of that app. Okay, reverse that. I'm a bank customer, right? For me, working with my bank is all about trust, right? Do I like the features of the app? Do I trust the bank? And so on and so forth. And with a millennial driven economy, they like jump all over the place, right? Who's got the better app as to, what they're going to use. Interesting small note about banks. I saw recent research that said while the younger folks went meandering off into these small startups, they're actually back with big banks like Bank of America and Citigroup because they actually build better apps, which I thought
Yeah,
was very fascinating. So
yeah.
you got that, you got the I'm a bank and I care about my customer. I'm a consumer, I care about my bank, right? Now let's roll a little further. Okay, so now, inside my enterprise, my employees, I may have bought 10 or 15 software packages. I have SAP for ERP, I have Concur, I have Salesforce, I have, rattle down that list, right? And so those are approved for use scenarios where my employees are probably using the web version. And of course, they're going to download the app to use the app on their smartphone, right? And so now as an IT organization, security organization, I need to represent or certify that it's okay for this company to be using, these particular commercial applications for my users. Well, the next challenge in that is, well, how safe is that ERP vendor or CRM vendor or whatever app? So what am I doing to vet that? And it goes another step further because every enterprise suffers from BYOD and BYOA. Now, bring your own device is generally an economic choice for most enterprises because they're not going to buy a device for every employee. Some might get them. But now the employees bring their own apps to the enterprise, and those apps are like regular consumer apps, right? So I'm using my favorite note-taking app. Maybe I use a voice to text app that happens to put my text and voice in the cloud. And oh, by the way, it's translating customer meeting notes. Okay, here's now bleeding data leakage into BYOA. Now, we're not going to prevent the data leakage, but it might be good to know that mobile app is doing translation in China, right? And so therefore might be getting its hands on your data depending on how that's working. So we have this whole interesting constellation where the user preference for many tasks is the mobile app, whether I'm the consumer or the employee. And it could be an app that's provided by a vendor I like the bank, or it could be provided as approved for use from the business, or it could be, something I choose to go to work. So it's actually kind of a complicated pickle for most enterprises to work on. And so finding some mechanism to make sure you're doing the right security vetting through the applications that you choose to use, but also doing it in a continuous way so that you're monitoring for changes. Just because one app is safe today doesn't mean 2 builds from now it's still safe. And that's all part of kind of that constellation of thinking about the user population, the giant, list of mobile apps they're using and what you can do about it.
How hard is it to kind of keep track of the configuration implications of a mobile app issue? Like there's different operating systems, there's different OEM manufacturers that have built the thing, there's different carriers.
Sure.
And you almost think like one app running on Android over Verizon might work just fine on iOS running over T-Mobile. Is that do those things have to come into account as an enterprise is assessing its risk?
Yeah, so I've got some good news, which is we test on real devices and have this massive data center of devices. We test over Wi-Fi, we test over carrier. What we've generally found is there's no material risk change as you switch devices, device types, carrier or Wi-Fi. In terms of the gaps, unless an app has been customized by a carrier or some other kind of provider. So, for example, we had a mobile app that was specially built for a certain vendor's router. So features only worked if you were testing it on a network that had that vendor's router, right? Kind of a mobile IoT scenario. But generally, so the real thing is that most people aren't vetting the apps at all, right? And that's because it's hard to pen test mobile apps and a lot of other things. So one of the things we did in our journey is we said, okay, we want to help people with building apps. We also want to help people with mass scale volume of deployed apps. You go to an organization that has 50 to 80,000 employees, that's probably 100,000 mobile devices on the network because you've got the iPhone and the iPad or the
Right.
Android and the tablet, right? And all that. And then you've got, 3/4 are BYO, and you go look at the population, we pull out of their MDM or their EMM, and we'll find that they have 20 to 40,000 applications, discrete applications. And everybody might be using SAP and everybody might be using Salesforce, but people pick different note-taking apps. They pick different travel apps. They've got games, they've got this, they've got that, right? And so what we try to do is provide, an at-scale analysis of all of those apps, no matter who's got them, where they are. And, you do your first inventory, you triage the list, and then you build your whitelist, blacklist, and you alert when those apps get updated over time. And it's actually relatively easy to do because of the way we built some tech that does it at scale, because humans just can't solve the problem. For the building part, there's a different level, which is I'm building apps really fast and I've got many of them. So now it's testing at scale through the development life cycle. And so the scale problem kind of hits both apps you build and apps you use.
Well, let's drill a little deeper into the tech. I mean, I know this is automated, so that's good. Love to hear about how you guys do that. But what are some of the strategies that you use? I know broadly, most people would think of security testing as having, set of requirements. I test for that, that's security. And then a very unconstrained set of strategies. We call that pen testing. And it's nice if you can do it automated, continuous, but it's pretty simplistic. But how do you guys think about that in the context of your platform? Like how would your customers?
It's a good question, right? So we look at ourselves as a full services, full solution suite vendor. We've got the training for your developers. We can actually train your pen testers to pen test mobile, right? So training begets other types of services like build a program and create program, mature program, assess how your overall business is doing on mobile and things like that. When we get into the software solutions, there's really two. So we have the NowSecure platform, which is in the cloud, and we have NowSecure Workstation. And if you think of them as being on two ends, one end is I want very deep, highly detailed diagnostics. That's Workstation. That's what a pen tester uses to tear apart a mobile application as it runs, communicating with its back ends, right? On the other end of the scale is I want highly automated, no human involved at all.
Yeah.
And that's where you're talking about, mass testing of millions of apps in the App Store. That's where you're talking about DevOps pipeline doing continuous security testing of every build of every day. What we've actually managed to do is both of those guys incorporate a standards-based set of tests built in. So we have OWASP, the OWASP Mobile Top 10, the OWASP API Top 10, plus the OWASP MASVS as a testing standard. We test for NIAP, which is a federal set of certification regulations for the federal government. We also test for a whole variety of industry verticals, so HIPAA, PCI, CCPA, GDPR, and alphabet soup of your favorite standards as well. And so our approach has actually been, because we've been pen testing for 10 years, we're one of the founding members of the OWASP Mobile Top 10, and we economically fund it and provide staffing to it every year, and other standards bodies that we continue to work on. We believe in a standard panel of testing. Test using standards consistently every app, every time. Now, you may not care about some subset of results and you can choose to ignore them or throw them away. But that very comprehensive list of over 200 tests for security, privacy, and compliance allow us to rigorously test whatever it is you have in whatever mode you want. And then you can take the results out of that. The results that we generate are actually generated not just for the security professional, but for the developer. And so the output then tells the developer, hey, we pinpointed 6 issues of unencrypted password. Here's where those calls were made. Here's the Apple or Google documentation on how to properly encrypt your password for transmission over the air. And here's a code sample. And so for the security team, it's accelerated findings. For the development team, it's accelerated mean time to repair. And for both of them, you get the fast feedback loop. And so to kind of tie the story together, whatever flavor of testing you want to do. If I'm iRobot and I have a Roomba running around the room, I'm going to use Workstation to interrogate my phone talking over Wi-Fi or Bluetooth to that iRobot that's sitting on the floor.
Makes sense.
And if I'm Uber and I'm doing my car app, which goes through builds 2 or 3 times a day, I'm going to use the cloud for high speed, high volume, continuous testing every time I build, because I've got a fast build to production cycle that I'm trying to work.
I have to ask you about 5G. So, as the mobility industry moves more and more toward these software-defined infrastructure with emphasis on integration with cloud, you mentioned a moment ago, and IAM, and certainly machine-to-machine, things like all the themes that we know are embedded in this next generation, emerging generation 5G. I'm thinking that apps will eventually start to integrate with these things. It would make sense, right? A
Mhm.
good application will take advantage of the advanced features. Do you worry about that? I mean, I'm guessing apps will get more complicated and maybe more tangled into the infrastructure. You think that'll make us less secure, more secure? What do you think about
Well,
when you hear
yeah.
5G context?
So it's a really good. So let me tell the world before 5G, and then we're going to add world 5G, which is complexity explosion, right? Potentially.
Yeah.
So if you look at the average application we test today, the average application we test today talks to at least a half a dozen APIs on the back end. Some of them talk 20, 30, or 50 APIs on the back end. Now those APIs might be yours, but they also might be, a New Relic for performance statistics. It could be you're using, Akamai Cloud Services for, syndication and traffic load bearing, and the list goes on and on. So the typical application today is maybe a third to half code I wrote, a third to half code someone else wrote, and a whole bunch of services that I may have actually licensed or stood up, for use. So we're already in a world where a mobile app talks to many, many things. And as you know, the app itself runs on the device, which is full of sensors, right? So I may or may not be able to get your geolocation easily from your web, but I guarantee I can get your geolocation from your phone, right? And so there's interesting things that start happening when you realize the thing is a giant data collector, right? And a lot of mobile apps run in a model where it's like cheap or shared use in exchange for you giving up your data. So now you have mass scale data harvesting effectively occurring. So you take that and then you say, let's evolve. Well, I brought up Roomba as a great example. A whole lot of mobile IoT is just exploding. I'm actually working on a benchmark right now for mobile IoT. We have hundreds of mobile applications that we're analyzing for that benchmark. That's one of the big vectors is most IoT things use a mobile app, perhaps even in preference over and above a web app, right? Your doorbell, your lights, your whatever. There's a lot of
Yeah.
industrial IoT. Buy a Caterpillar tractor, you get a mobile app, or a John Deere, right? Buy robots or automation processing equipment for your manufacturing distribution plant. Get Android tablets that talk to that thing, right? So the reason I bring those up is we're already in a world that I call multi, 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 multi. So with 5G, it gets really interesting, right? So I use the mobile IoT kind of angle to sort of think about it. Most IoT scenarios are a mobile app talks to a thing, and there may be a cloud in the middle, and that cloud thing might talk to something in a data center. Now I've got exciting new services that I could take advantage of with 5G to build a next generation app that maybe has, some virtual reality in it or augmented
Yeah.
reality in it that, I don't know, you walk the whole, like you see it in the movies, right? You walk past a store and your phone pops up and it shows you wearing a suit or a dress that's in the window of the store that you walk past because they're trying to get you to come in, like there's all kinds of really interesting things. There's also the mass content streaming at very high speed that I think is going to change, experiences. Right now, a mobile developer still, even with the bandwidth we seem to have most places, still kind of is light unless it's intentionally a streaming app. You're not going to open your average banking app and get live video in it. You're not going to open your average banking app and get a how-to video in it, like how to withdraw money or something is like that, or maybe how to request a mortgage, right? I think the notion of the location-based activities that we'll get with 5G and the notion of the bandwidth density that's hopefully, as reliable as everyone's projecting, means new kinds of experiences, right? Imagine like augmented virtual reality interacting with a banker while standing in front of a cash machine, or maybe with COVID, my phone is actually helping me buy a suit, and then you just walk up to the store and it's already tailored and ready to go, right? I mean, it's got that VR and AR, and I'm interacting with it, and here I can wear it, and we see pieces of a lot of that today. And so where it can go, I think is really exciting.
The educational opportunities crazy out of space. Just so many interesting things you can do teaching kids and students.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't even go down that one, right? Like we're
So you're
homeschooling. I'm in a
thinking that
place where I'm homeschooling now.
tangled complexity. Do you worry about the security implications of that explosion of complexity with all of that?
Yeah, and I think it's n-dimensional, right? So today, given the stats I used earlier about a mobile app talking to dozens of cloud and backend API services and all the sensors in it and all the data it gathers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, this is just like a may or may not be exponential, but it's certainly a multiplier on that. And so what's really important is organizations are going to need to establish a security baseline, which a lot haven't yet, which is what is my definition of security and privacy for my mobile ecosystem that I have today, the infrastructure I have in place that accommodates the apps I build, the apps I use. They're for me, for my employees, they might be for my customers, right? And then how is that going to evolve as technology evolves? Am I willing to allow mobile IoT in the traditional sense? Am I going to allow these other new experiences in with 5G? The answer is probably yes. The next question becomes, what are my controls? What controls do I have in place and what visibility do I have as the world effectively changes underneath me, right? We had the chance to do this before with web, and most of us didn't build security into the web, right? We had the chance to do this with cloud, and the good news is most cloud vendors have done a good job with security on their own, right? Or have the ability to configure pretty good security controls. And so with this, as mobile evolves, people need to think, security first, or secure by design as a fundamental element of evolving into 5G. I mean, as a potential like marketing, sales, business person inside, a commercial industry, whether it's education or retail or something, I can imagine they're drooling about the new kinds of features they might be able to offer to attract and retain customers. We as technologists need to be responsible that when people are doing mobile digital transformation, be it 5G, IoT, or something else, we need to help them along the way to take advantage of these really cool new capabilities, and do it in a safe way, right? And any of us who's been around systems and technology long enough know it's people, process, technology, standards, policy, execution, controls, like all of those things are all baked into where it goes.
That's so interesting. You guys have picked such an awesome part of our industry. You enjoying working with clients and working with customers on all the mobility stuff? Seems like a vibrant
I
area.
love it every day, right? I mean, I was just on a really cool customer call. I'm about to go into another customer call tomorrow. I think what's interesting about it is you get to see really innovative things people are doing.
Mm.
When I was exposed to, and this is public because they've spoken, people at Uber have spoken about it. The infrastructure behind how Uber does innovation from the technology stack is stunningly amazing. They
Mm.
have built basically their own on bare metal infrastructure, the way they run their DevSecOps pipelines, the way they add features. Uber is different in every country. Some countries like they get like they can do barter, and you can order a truck to deliver a vehicle, and like it's not just the car that and they've really built a commercial business platform, which is amazing. And you see some things like that. And then you have things that happened last year, COVID. We got pulled in and worked with many COVID app makers who just wanted to help solve the COVID problem. And some of them were consortiums and some of them were hospitals or medical centers, whatever.
Sure.
And they don't know the first thing about mobile security, but they're trying to deal with tracking and tracing and, how do I protect myself and, that kind of thing. And so we've kind of seen the whole gamut. You can tell probably from my attitude that I love it. I'm Chief Mobility Officer. My job is to work with customers on their strategy, help them evolve that strategy, right? And I love to see what comes out the other end with a lot of really cool things that are safe for everybody to use.
That's really awesome. I want to close with maybe some thoughts on things that are happening in future. These nation state attacks that are coming, and that's pretty scary. Like I just recently heard about some hackers trying to go after the water, the concentration of chemicals in the water supply in Florida. Real crazy, scary stuff. Well, what do you think? I know you've been at this a while. Are you generally optimistic about things, or do you worry about big attacks like with these
Yeah.
mobility
The
infrastructure
mobile angle.
touching
Yeah.
consequential thing? Where do you stand on that spectrum?
I think it's a really good question. So as a human, I'm bullish on humans still doing the right thing, even though there's pockets of humans that
Me
don't.
too. Me too.
And I believe generally the infrastructure is resilient, and I do see pretty good response to
Yeah.
gaps once people are aware of them. So that's the good news. We don't do a lot of responsible disclosures, but most people pounce on it when we do. So that's exciting to see. I think there's an ignorance of the risk around mobile security. So when you ask me about predictions, I will predict there'll be a couple of really bad mobile breaches, hopefully not life-threatening in the next year. I think
Yeah.
some of them will be around mobile IoT, some of them will be financial oriented. The banks are always getting attacked for everything. The retail consumer brands and some of the retail manufacturers maybe aren't as well defended. There is, for those who are worried about IP, there's a ton of IP theft going on, and there's a ton of consumer harvesting. So a lot of these mobile applications collect an inordinate amount of data, maybe access the address book and things like that. So people need to be safe in how they configure and use their apps. So I think there'll be breaches and general issues, publicity around one of those, right? And one or more of those I think will happen. So that's the negative of there's
Yeah.
going to be more breaches. They just don't go away. They will be on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, et cetera, et cetera. On the flip side, I actually am seeing the industry moving towards standards. So OWASP MAS VS, now we've got a ton of inbounds. People are talking about it a lot more. If you don't know OWASP, it's an industry consortium. There's no vendor driving it. We're excited people are looking at standards as a way, like it's a game of whack-a-mole. How do I know what should be on my checklist? I'm just going to use the OWASP checklist. So I think we'll get more of that. I think mobile IoT is pretty Wild West right now, and I think there'll be some coming together of the community around security standards for
Certainly in the
IoT.
context of 5G as well. I mean, the mobile IoT and 5G go together.
They're hugely linked, right? So I think all this will come together. The interesting thing is we don't have an underwriter's laboratory, as it were, for anything about mobile.
It could be you guys, right?
It could be us, or it could be a group of us, right? We don't have it for IoT either, right? And you hear about the IoT breaches. So I think our long-term vision is we could be an underwriter's laboratory, right? We could be the validator for people of all kinds, whether you're a creator of a thing, meaning you're building the mobile app or the mobile thing, or you're the consumer of the thing, and there's a place to go. So I think that's interesting. I also think that we're living in this world where the mobile experience becomes more transparent, right? So I think this notion of the digital screen and digital experience moving around more is really coming. I have, for example, a Tesla. I love it. It's basically a driving computer. My phone and my Tesla interact, or some cool things there, but there's a next level that this could go to, right? Where my human life experience and the things like my car and my house could really be a whole new, kind of level of transparency, possibly with 5G, but there are just other innovations that, where people are pushing the envelope on. And I think that all those things become really interesting also to the businesses of the world, because everybody's got a phone in their pocket. Yeah. Right. So brands, was on the phone with I can't attribute it, but one of the world's largest consumer retail brands that's suffering because nobody can go in their many different stores.
Okay.
And they're like, you don't understand. We did a business with them last fall. They're like, you don't understand. In 72 hours, in a week, 90% of our transactions moved from our physical storefronts to web and mobile. And it's been running for like 90 days. And now my mobile digital transformation needs to be finished next week, because we're heading towards 80 to 90% of our buyers are buying on the mobile app. And we never built it for that. We built a mobile app for browsing, right? And so I think that step shift, the Corona pandemic has accelerated that mobile first customer preference. And I think we're just going to continue to see that steamroll. And even if coronavirus goes away, that built-in preference for using mobile as the front end in everyday life, because you got it in your pocket and you can spend 2 minutes doing this or that, is just going to further dominate. And so I think from a trends overall, the C-suite needs to say, how does mobile fit our business today, and how's it going to change tomorrow? Whether it's 5G and AR and other types of innovation, whether it's IoT or whatever, mobile is dominating the culture of the end user, who is your customer and your employee. And so imagining and reimagining what that means in kind of a digital workforce and a digital customer base is what I think we'll see even more of. And the laggards will get left behind, and the leaders will race ahead, like every other technology wave we've ever been through.
Such an interesting vision. Now, Brian, people are interested in the platform. Is the website a good place for them to go?
Yeah, so come to www.nowsecure.com. You can find us online there. We're also on social. We've got a very active blog for those of you who are on the technology side. For those of you on the executive side, we've got resources you can use for everything from mobile digital transformation strategy to purchase justification and economic transition and all those kinds of things to help you out.
It is good stuff. I read it. So, well, Brian, on behalf of our team at Tag Cyber and everyone listening, thanks for making some time. Always fun to catch up, and this is such an interesting area. I hope we can connect up again and have part 2 soon.
Thank you for the time today, and I look forward to more. It's a great space to be in, and I'm here for the duration. So be well.
Thanks so much. And for everyone else, we'll see you next time.